Hello, welcome to the West Ham Way YouTube. Myself, Mark Carlaw, and today I'm joined by West Ham legend, is a hero of mine, and I'm absolutely delighted to say he's on the show, Tony Cottee. Tony, how are you, mate?
How you doing, Mark? Yeah, pleasure to be on the show, and very kind of you to say that I was one of your heroes. So I'm sure you've had plenty of heroes over the years. It wasn't just me.
Well, do you know what? I got to say, do you know what, Tony? Like, before we get into it, I remember you when you came back to the club, and we'll come to that a little bit later. When you returned from Everton, and I was desperate for you to come back because my dad was a massive fan of yourselves and still is. And and I was honestly, you were my hero for those years. And I'll tell you what, I remember your autobiography. I think I must have read that 20 times on the spin. I must have read, so I feel like, and I wish I had a copy of it here because I think it's at my mum's in the loft, but. There you go. But no, this is a real pleasure, mate. So do thank you very much for coming on.
You're welcome, Mark.
So I want to start with before we get into where we are now and how things are. I want to talk about sort of right back at the beginning, Tony. Your love for West Ham and how that all started. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, I'm just born into a West Ham family, Mark. Really, like a lot of the fans, like a lot of the people that will watch this. I think as a West Ham fan, it's special. I think you get told to support the club. I don't think, certainly in my house, it was never ever up for discussion. There was no other team mentioned. It was just dad supports West Ham, mum supports West Ham, aunts and uncles, nans and granddad. Everyone supports West Ham. You will be a West Ham fan, and it was never up for discussion, or you couldn't sort of do what a lot of the kids do nowadays seem to do. Is like, Liverpool are doing well, I'll support Liverpool or Chelsea or whatever it might be. There was none of that in my house. It was just West Ham. I was born in West Ham. It's on my. I love the fact I get me every time I get my passport out. I open my passport out. It says birthplace West Ham. I love that fact. You can't do that anymore because Forest Gate Hospital isn't there. So I've got something very special that will be with me on my passport until the day I die, which is lovely. So, I think just as a young kid, my dad took me, first time he took me, I think I was 6 years of age. We played Forest at home, 71-72 season. And I went to the game and I was just hooked on it. I went after the game, I remember saying, Dad, when can we go next? When's the next time? It was one of those scenarios really. And I just went as much as I could. And when I got old enough, I started going to home games and eventually started going to away games. So I was home and away supporter, and and I always say one of the most disappointing things about me becoming a player was I couldn't be a fan anymore, and that was, it sounds silly, and a lot of people probably say, well, I don't quite get what you mean, but I genuinely love being a fan. I really did, and I think anyone who's seen me over the last 20 years really since I've retired. I've worked for the club, obviously not working for them at the moment, but I followed the club in Europe last year and I just had a great time. It was just nice to be a fan again, and I will always be a fan, and that will never change.
Well, that's the thing with yourself, Tony. You're like, it's almost like the Mark Noble thing. Like, well, I was saying to you before we started recording about, I bumped into you in Leon, and that's the thing with yourself. It's like you are a fan. You're a real fan. You really you bleed claret and blue, and you really sense that when you're around you, and it does make something really extra special. So, no, you can see that. And my next point was going to be your debut for the club. Obviously, you made it against Tottenham Hotspur, 17 years old, I believe, at the time, and you scored. I mean, amazing. I mean, that must have been so special for you and your family.
It's just an incredible day, Mark, really. I mean, I literally could spend hours talking about it and going through every detail, where it happened. And, it was just so special to me, and to basically within the space of 18 months go from being a fan, which I was. I left school at the age of 15. I left school in the May of 81. And then in the January of 83, it was just over 18-month period, and I'm playing in the first team. And the players that I've been cheering on, the likes of Phil Parkes, Trevor Brooking, Billy Bonds, Frank Lampard, Alan Devonshire, incredible player, Alvin, great players, and all of a sudden I'm playing with these players, and it was just amazing experience, really. And then I always say, if you could have said to me, get a bit of paper on the New Year's Eve. The game was on New Year's Day. If you'd give me a bit of paper on New Year's Eve, so write down what you want to happen.
Yeah.
Exactly what I wanted to happen. To score after 25 minutes, to beat Spurs 3-0, which was always will be our great rivals. And it was just genuinely just an amazing day. My mum and dad were there, brother and sister, all my family were there, and it was just fantastic, really. And the surreal part of it really was sitting down to watch the big match. It wasn't match of the day on the Saturday night, it was big match.
Right.
And you had Brian Moore, was the famous ITV commentator, and he'd done the game, And then after the match, I've done an interview with Trevor Brooking, which is, I look back now, it's awful. I'm only 17. I'm so shy and got dyed blonde hair and everything. It's awful. It's an awful interview. But, when you look back and you think, I just think I was lucky that the game was televised, because so many games in those days, I mean, all the youngsters watching this won't realise that there was only 2 or 3 games every weekend that were shown. It wasn't every single Premier League game. So I'm just lucky that the game was filmed and the interview was filmed, and whenever I want, not that I want to do it, Mark, but I can always refer back to it if I need to.
Yeah, well, it's what you're trying to say then, exclusive, is that the blonde locks, they're not coming back. Is that what we're saying?
They're definitely not coming back now. You can see the grey. I think it's more the grey look that's coming in now. The gel conceals it a little bit, but there's definitely the grey hairs coming in. No blonde hairs anymore.
Talking of blonde locks, I was asked by somebody to ask you this at my work, and who's Scottish, and referring back to the 85-86 season, obviously you and Frank McAvennie, amazing partnership. I don't think it was really expected to happen, but it did happen, and it was amazing. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of it. Unfortunately, I was just not quite old enough for that time, really, which is a bit of a shame, which I wished I'd been. But I wanted to ask you, what was it like playing with Frank? Because from my understanding of him and what I've seen him in interviews, he was such a character and such a, I don't know, a sort of a party atmosphere about him. And whereas yourself, Tony, very professional, very different. Was there any sort of clash of personalities with yourselves, or did you get on well? How was it working with Frank?
No clash at all, Mark. In fact, I spoke to Frank this morning. We still always have and always will have a great relationship. We do stuff together still to this day. We do after dinner stuff and other appearances together. So I've always gotten fantastically well with Frank. Probably one of the reasons I do get on so well with him is because we're so different.
Yeah.
I think if I was doing what he was doing back in the 80s, then the partnership wouldn't have been what it was. Frank knows that, and I know that. And excuse me, the reason it clicked, I think, was because we was so different. But on the field, there wasn't no differences on the field. He knew what I was wanting to do, and I knew what he wanted to do, and we just gelled. And it's just a shame, really, that we only played together. It was only just over 2 years, but if you look at the stats, in literally just over 2 years, we scored over 100 goals between us. Yeah. And if you look at what we've been crying out for over the last, I don't know how far you want to go back. You can probably go back to Jermaine Defoe. Really, the last time we had sort of a real proper goal scorer in the team. It was an amazing achievement by both of us to score so many goals, and just a shame, really, that the 86 team sort of broke up so quickly. Really, it's very frustrating that happened. Obviously, there was reasons, but Frank, he's just an amazing character. I love him to bits, and when he comes to London, he lives in Glasgow now. When he comes to London, he comes down, and it's like he's 26 again, and instead of 62, I think the numbers are the wrong way round. He's 62, and you swap them around 26, you get where he still is in his life. So, but he's great fun and a great friend of mine.
That's fantastic. It's great to hear that. And brilliant. And as you say, it's a shame with the 85-86, you say it's all disbanded so quickly, which is just typical West Ham, really. It's just, we're doing well, and you just know that there's always sort of doom on the horizon.
It just didn't build on it, Mark. I mean, I think John. I don't know whether it was John Lyall couldn't get the players in, or whether the club wasn't prepared to spend the money. It could have been a bit of both, but we needed to add to the squad. And I think, what applied in '86 applies to football now. That if you don't expand your squad, if you don't improve the squad at the end of each season, then you're not going to progress. And I think, unfortunately, that's what happened. I don't think we brought anyone in. Obviously, we had good players, but then, of course, we got a few injuries. Once you get the injuries, you're not got the same team, and we didn't have the depth of squad. So I think it's a lesson that's worth sort of bearing in mind going forward. If you no matter how good your season was, if you don't improve at the end of that season, then you're not going to get better next year.
Absolutely. And obviously, sadly, then it was only, I think, about a couple of years after that you departed yourself, went up to Everton. I think you spent, was it 6 years up in Everton? Was that right, Tony?
Yes, a long time, Mark. Yeah. I mean, I had a great time. It's a wonderful football club. It's very, very, very similar to West Ham in terms of the fans, their personalities, their emotions, their passion for the football club. I always say that West Ham and Everton, very, very similar working class clubs, and that, which I loved about it. And obviously I could have signed for Arsenal at the time. It would have been the easy option, but You know, I felt that Everton wanted me more, and I went up there. I had 6 great years. The only disappointment, I didn't win anything, and that was one of the reasons I went there, was to try and win a trophy. And of course, I didn't win the trophy. And by the time I came back to West Ham for the second spell, you know, I was still trophyless, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a real shame for you, and something you deserved, really. When you say about your return, I mean, this was the time where I personally was delighted to see you come back to West Ham. The number 27 shirt, I remember getting it printed and still got it somewhere. And then you made your debut, Tony, your second debut. I was very excited to see you play.
Anyway, moving on, Mark. Moving on.
We have to talk about it.
Oh,
my word, what happened there, Tony? That was what happened. Come on, let's hear about it.
Do you know what? Whenever you make your debut for whatever club it might be, you're very pumped up. You're very, I don't know. There's just this massive adrenaline rush going through your body, and you know, sometimes it's hard to control your emotions. You know, you obviously want to do well on your debut. My first debut for West Ham, we've already spoke about, fantastic. My debut for Everton, I scored a hat-trick for Everton. So, you know, I'd had good debuts. And then, of course, by the time I get to my second debut for West Ham, and I don't know, I just, you know, funny enough, I reviewed the incident the other day, and, you know, you sort of laugh at it when I watch it back. But I think Rob Jones was the Liverpool fullback, and he quite clearly fouls me, and the ball gets played forward. The referee can give it. And then by the time he got to getting the ball on, sort of right on the touchline, you know, I just came across, slid in. It looks a lot worse than it actually was. I didn't touch him, but I think, you know, it was an excuse for any defender. If in the old days, you can't do it now because you would 100% would get sent off. But in the old days, you normally used to be able to wait a little bit and wait for the fullback to play it down the line and just come in a little bit late and sort of have a little bit of connection, which is what I tried to do. But I actually didn't even kick him, so it wasn't really worth me getting sent off because I hadn't even kicked him. But no, it's the worst feeling in the world. And you know, I knew I was late with the tackle, and I thought, oh God, I'm going to be in trouble here. You know, he's going to give me a yellow card. And then he just straight away went, boom, red card. And I thought, oh, right. And I think luckily for me, I was literally 10 yards from the tunnel. So I had to walk 10 yards and I went down the steps at Anfield off the pitch. Obviously, coming from Everton as well, you can imagine what the fans were doing, the Liverpool fans. And probably the West Ham fans were shaking their heads thinking, oh, God, what we brought him back for? But I put it right the following week because I scored against Villa in my home debut. So I tried to make up for it a little bit. But no, listen, these things happen. You know, the best players in the world get sent off sometimes. It's just a part of football. But it's not something I'm particularly fond of discussing too much.
Well, I've actually watched it back, and I actually think that you should have been. I thought you should have been given a free kick.
Yeah,
and I thought that's why you lost your rag, because I thought you looked at the ref to say that's a foul, and then you then reacted just to have pure,
exactly what happened. But you know, I can't condone what I did because obviously it was wrong and it was worthy of a sending off.
Fair enough, Tony. I mean, also in that season, there was a game I want to bring you to. It was in December at home. We were playing Manchester City. The reason I bring this game up, and I'm hoping you do remember it, I'm guessing you remember the match, but maybe not the build-up, because before the game, I was with my dad. We were driving down the motorway to the ground, and you passed us in the car. You actually then went in front of us.
Yeah.
Tony Cottee. And I think this was the days when you had your name written on the car, if I'm right.
Yeah, would have been. I hope it didn't cut you off.
Yeah, that's it. And we said to you 2-0. We were saying it's going to be 2-0. And you went, no, 3-0.
Did I really?
I was like, oh, brilliant. You know, speaking to Tony Cottee, my hero and all that. And it was 3-0.
And I scored all 3 goals.
You scored all 3 goals. And I was just wondering, do you remember that day well?
Oh, of course I do, Mark. Yeah, I mean, you remember, games like that, obviously you remember. And the best thing about that really is it was the first ever Premier League hat-trick by a West Ham player. And, that will never, ever change. So, I can look back and, I've got 2 Premier League records. I scored the first hat-trick for Everton as a Premier League player, and I also scored the first hat-trick for West Ham. So when you look back, you don't realise when you're doing what you're doing, and you don't realise when you're scoring. Yeah, of course it was a hat-trick. Yeah, it was great. And I think it was my only home league hat-trick as well. I scored hat-tricks in the FA Cup and the League Cup, I think, but I don't ever scored I think it was the only league hat-trick as well. But, what's great about it is whenever they talk about, a Premier League hat-trick scorer for West Ham, hopefully Scamacca, for example, is going to get a hat-trick one day, and then they'll turn around and they'll have the list. Antonio will be on it, obviously. And then I'll be number one. I'll be the first one to have done that. So no one can ever take that away from me. So I didn't realise at the time how important it was because of how big the Premier League is now. But you know, it was great for me to get the 3 goals. But it was obviously a special part of West Ham's history, really.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and especially by a lot of fans as well. I mean, it was a memorable day. You know, brilliant performance, obviously from yourself and the team. But so no, it was brilliant, Tony. In terms of where we are now, then, I mean, we've obviously come off a busy summer at the club. Spent a lot of money. Daniel Krasinski's now on board. There was obviously you, previously, and rightly so, by the way, you have been critical about the club at times, about how it's been run and things like that, which I think a lot of fans would share that and possibly still do, to be honest. What's your feelings in terms of where we are now? Do you think the club's going in the right direction? And what's your feelings on the summer spend? Is that a sign of that? I don't know. The club is the owners are making amends. What's your feelings on it?
Well, I think is the club going in the right direction? It's a hard one to answer, Mark. I think we won't know until probably this time next year. And what I mean by that is I'm expecting a change of ownership. Come the end of the season. So we're then going to, once you go into new ownership, then you then don't really know what direction it's going to go in. Hopefully it's going to go in the right direction. Obviously, we want that to happen. The one thing I want the club to do, I want the club to buy the stadium. Obviously it's, well known that I backed the PAI bid last year, in terms of trying to get ownership of the club. And one of the main things of that bid that I was fully in favour was buying the stadium. So I think that's something that the club has to do as well going forward, because you can't give the fans what they want. You can't look after the fans until you own the stadium. And putting up stupid walls, which, as you well know, they've done, that sort of thing shouldn't happen if you own your own stadium. If you don't own your stadium, other people can do things that aren't right for football fans. So I think, it's a question I can't really answer because no one's got a crystal ball. No one really knows what's going to be happening this time next year and probably in a couple of years' time when hopefully the club has sorted the stadium out. In terms of the spending this year, I think, as we've already touched on, we needed to improve the squad. Obviously, we didn't know whether we needed to buy 10, 12 players, whatever it was, and spend 170 odd million. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I don't. It's only me personally. I don't like huge volumes of players arriving at a football club, and I understand that the squad was a little bit light. I get that, but I don't know. Just paying £30 million for players, sometimes I think there's a case for, as in Paqueta, what did it cost? £50 million. And, maybe buying 3 players for 150 million and then getting 6 players for 2-3 million more, a couple of free transfers. Look at Craig Dawson, for example. There are bargains to be had out there. But you want to buy the key players. Only time will tell what the signings have been like. I think Paqueta looks a good player. Scamacca looks a good player. We haven't seen the centre half. It costs 30 million. Nayed, is it? And whatever that is, we haven't seen him. I'm trying to remember all the names, Mark. There's been so many names.
There's quite a few, isn't there, coming through?
Yeah, there is. But trying to, Flynn Downs has done well in the 2 games he's played. So I'd like to see more of him in midfield. So I mean, we needed the players in. We was. Unfortunately, and this, I think everyone will look back, and history we will look back, and we will regret not signing players in the January window this year. It was absolute madness not to do it. We could all see what was coming. We all knew that the squad, it was a good squad, good team, etc. But that come the end of the season, players run out of steam, they run out of fitness and get injured, whatever. And we needed to get 2 or 3 players in that window. We didn't need 10 players in the current window, the summer window. We needed 3 players in the January window. If we'd have done that, I think it would have given us more of a chance to have beaten Frankfurt. And if you look at what we would have got, if we'd have beaten Frankfurt, final against Rangers, beat Rangers, you're playing Real Madrid in the Super League Cup or whatever it's called, and you're playing in the Champions League. And those sort of opportunities don't come along too often. So I understand why we brought in a lot of players, but I'm never a big fan of it. And you look at someone like Nottingham Forest bringing in 22 players, it's just ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. But, we did it, I think it was about 4 years ago under Pellegrini, brought in 10 players and it didn't work. So you just hope this time it's going to work.
Completely agree, and especially as your point on last season, the January, I'll never really get my head around why we didn't add. And as you say, we could all see it coming. It's still scratchy. But as you say, we move on, and hopefully that the signings. I mean, they are starting to show their gelling, which is good. A
Yeah.
player you mentioned, Tony, and one I'm really eager to ask you about is Scamacca. Obviously, you being a striker. Is he one? I mean, I'm looking at him now. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but have we got the sort of complete package guy? Have we got someone that you think this guy could bag 20 goals a season? What's your feelings on him at the moment?
Well, you like to think so, Mark. And, again, another sort of, it's not a record, but another stat that, I'm the last player to have scored over 20 league goals for West Ham in a season, which is
Yeah.
ridiculous. It was 35 years ago. So, that tells you where the problems have been for West Ham. It's finding that goal scorer. And of course, it's not easy. And of course, it costs a lot of money. I understand that. But in Scamacca, I'm genuinely excited. I like what I've seen so far. There's areas of his game that he can improve. And as he gets fitter, they will, that will happen naturally. He's got to get used to the Premier League. Sometimes you've got to go for headers that you don't always want to go for. He'll have to learn how to do that, a bit like what Antonio does. But I think we've got a real contrast with the two of them. Mickey's fantastic. We saw what he brought to the game, against Fulham the other day coming on. He causes havoc. I love watching him play because I think sometimes a lot of the time he doesn't know what he's going to do. So the defenders have got no chance, have they? They're never going to work out what he's doing. So I love.
I think he can.
Yeah, exactly. I love watching him play. I think Scamacca, he looks like what you said. He's got everything. He's playing for Italy, so he's a good player because to play up front for Italy, you've got to be a good player. I think we've just got to look after him. We've got to get him the service, which is one of the main things, and just see how good he is at getting on the end. A bit like what Haaland's doing for City. As much as City play great football, a lot of his goals come from crosses. Get the ball in the box. It frustrates the hell out of me, football nowadays, where they don't cross the ball early. Just whip the ball in, like what David Beckham used to do. Don't look, just put it in there.
Yeah,
and then if you're not there, that's your fault. That's your own silly fault. Or when I played, if someone didn't cross the ball early, I'd absolutely slaughter them. Just put the ball in. And I think what we've got to do, get the service into Scamacca, see how good he is in terms of his finishing. But a couple of his goals, technically striking the ball really well. He does look a really, really good prospect. But as I say, you're only as good as your service, and it's important that we get whatever the formation and the players are behind him. It's important to get the right players in place. If we do that, I honestly think we can have a good run in the league, push up the league, and the one thing I want us to do, I want us to win the Conference League. I think that should be our target for this season.
I completely agree. And I was going to say that to you as well. I think that it's got to be our target, isn't it? I mean, we're desperate for a trophy. I mean, I've never seen us lift one, and I'd love to see it, like we all would. And it's time. And I think you're right. We've got to look at the Conference League and think we should be having that. We really should be. We should be one of the favourites. So
or the League Cup or the FA Cup, Mark. You look at over the last 20 odd years. You look at teams like Wigan have won the FA Cup. Swansea have won the League Cup. They're teams that have done it, and there's no. I know you need a little bit of luck, and you could probably say that we haven't always had the luck, and then we get Man City or Man United in the draw or whatever it might be, and it doesn't work out. I get that, but you can't keep coming up with hard luck stories. And listen, I've been a part of it because I was involved in a lot of the teams that should have done better and should have got to finals. But you're quite right. I mean, 1980 is too long. It's far too long for us to have won a trophy. And, you're looking now, even with the FA Cup, it's 16 years already since we played Liverpool. So, 2006. So,
it's a long time, isn't it?
Time absolutely flies, as we all know. So, we've got the players and the squad now. And I think that, I would genuinely take a mid-table finish if we could win a trophy. It wouldn't bother me in the slightest, as long as we're not in relegation trouble, which I don't think we will be. We've got too many good players for that. Let's just get in a position, I think we're finished between 7th and 12th. I think that's where we'll finish. And I'll take that. If we can win a trophy, that'll do me all day long.
I completely agree. And I think every fan would agree with that, to be honest with you. So going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Tony, before we wrap this up. We've got a couple of games coming up this week, tomorrow night and elect. A game where we can secure the knockout stages, followed by Premier League action again on the Sunday, Southampton away. What are your predictions for these two games, mate? What do you reckon?
Honestly, I'm terrible at predictions. He shouldn't really do that to me. But I'm going to the game tomorrow night, the Anderlecht game. I think we'll beat them. I didn't see the game last week, so I don't know how hard or easy the game was. I didn't see anything at all of the game because I was away on holiday. But I expect us to beat Anderlecht. We've got 9 points now. 10 points would be enough to get you through. So even if we draw, we get 10 points. So, what we need to do, what we did last year, win the group so that you haven't got to play in the playoffs in February. Yeah. But I'm expecting us to beat Anderlecht. I'm going to go 2-0 against Anderlecht. We're then away to Southampton in the Premier League. Southampton aren't brilliant this year. I honestly believe we can go there and get results. So I'm going to go 2-1 away victory at Southampton. And then a game I'm going to next Wednesday, which is Liverpool-West Ham. I'm going up as a fan. I'm not working, so I'm going as a fan with my mate. And I'm looking forward to it. And, it's probably as good a time as you're going to get to play Liverpool as well, because they've been so good over the last 2, 3, 4 seasons. At the moment, they're in a bit of disarray. So I think we can go up there and get a result, maybe nick a draw at Liverpool as well. So there you go. Ever the optimist as a hammer. So we've got 2 victories and a draw over the next week or so. But I think we'd all take that.
Well, there you go. And promised and guaranteed by Tony Cottee.
Not guaranteed. No, not promised either. But as I said, I'm not very good at predictions, Mark, so it could be the complete opposite. But, we live in hope.
There you go. Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Obviously, you do your piece for the Patreon for the West Ham Way, which I love reading as well.
I've really enjoyed it, yeah. I mean, I've only done August and September, but in around about a week's time, I'll get my thinking cap on. And it's nice just to be able to talk and put it down. I genuinely do it myself. I type it all up and everything. It's my fault. So it's not ghost written in any shape or form. So I've really enjoyed doing the first 2 months, and I look forward to doing the column at the end of October.
Well, I love reading them, mate. So yeah, I look forward to it. It's fantastic. Thank you, Tony, for this. It's been really great speaking to you.
Cheers, Mark. Absolute pleasure.
You take care. Bye, mate.
Thanks, mate.